What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
Welcome to this World Satsanga being held on the 29th of September 2018 in conjunction with Kevin Moore and The Moore Show. And you can visit Kevin's YouTube channel, The Moore Show, to see all of the things that Kevin's doing, what he's broadcasting, and the important information on different spiritual angles that he's uncovering and presenting to those people of the human race who are interested in understanding parts of the truth. So thank you, Kevin, for all that work you're doing. And thank you, Kevin, for also presenting and broadcasting the satsangas on your channel as well. So this month we are going to talk about what the life plan is and what its purpose is. We're also going to go through a whole bunch of questions that people have sent in. Different people this time, so I'm really pleased about the different angles that people are asking questions about. And then we're going to go through a meditation to contact one's guide and helpers, because being able to communicate with our guide and helpers also helps us understand our life plan and helps us go with the flow. And we've got a few questions surrounding that as well. Okay, so what is a life plan and what is its purpose? Well, when we are in the energetic, in between incarnations, we choose, or our true energetic self, which is sometimes called the oversoul or higher self or Godhead. It all means the same thing. It's that much larger part of us which remains disincarnate and in the energetic, decides to reincarnate, and it also decides, and we can decide with it, or depending upon our level of contribution towards the evolutionary level or status or progression of our true energetic self, we can also decide what we want to experience within the next incarnation. And that creates a plan, so to speak. Now, it's very simple in saying it like that, but it's quite complicated, because what we do is we understand from a very high level what we want to experience. That can be a career, it can be a sport, it can be certain things around us, it can be environments, it can be partnerships, it can be ways in which we experience our incarnation from, the health basis, whether it's disability or whether it's extreme fitness or health, extreme longevity, short longevity, specialisms, whether we contribute towards the wider community, whether we are helping others spiritually, or whether we're just being immersed in our incarnation. All these things come into play when understanding and deciding upon what we want to do and when we're going to do it. The thing is, it's a very loose plan, in so much as if we don't achieve it all, it's not an issue. We can add it on to the next incarnation should we wish to do so. And if we do achieve it, but we'd like to achieve it in a different way, we can again add that onto the next incarnation. So the The interesting thing to understand is that was a rather annoying little message from Microsoft saying me that something's been updated. I didn't expect that. I'll have to turn the let's see if I can turn this speaker off. That's better. So we won't get annoyed again by Mr. Gates. Sorry about that, but sometimes your software is a bit intrusive. I can imagine a few people are laughing at that. So what we have is a plan which is based upon a number of experiences. Now, some of these experiences also include things like karma, how to overcome certain karmic effects, and those of you who have listened to the program, the satsanga, about what karma is, will understand that sometimes it's about how we interact with our environment and how we interact with others within our environment, and how, because working in low frequency environments can be quite addictive, and we can crave to come back into an incarnate state to experience things like physical sensations when having sex, for instance, nicotine in smoking, alcohol, certain different things about being fit and healthy, you know, sort of experiencing the adrenaline rush when we're you know, doing extreme sports, for instance, these sorts of things. We can crave these things, and these can be an addiction, including things like status, material wealth, position, being a noted individual, and having people look up to us. All these things can be part of our addictions to coming back to the physical, and so we have to overcome those to help us become or master our incarnations, and therefore move to the point where we don't need to incarnate again. And a life plan can incorporate this as well. And in terms of our interactions with other individuals, this can be that maybe we've helped somebody experience something in a previous incarnation, and then we want to have that reciprocated in this incarnation, or somebody's done something to us that wasn't part of the plan, for instance, and there needs to be some level of reciprocation there to negate the karma. You know, the old thing about an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, is to sort of balance out the karma between two people and therefore negate it. But we can also learn to forgive and forget, and that's the most powerful way in which we can negate karma or karmic links between two people. So all of this can be part of the plan as well. So the purpose of the plan overall is to allow us to master incarnation, so we don't need to come back here anymore, and this takes a long time, lots and lots and thousands and thousands of different lives. It can be to negate different karmic links with individuals, or how to navigate through different karmic situations, or be able to move through different interactions with individuals that could accrue karma but negate them. And also the various different things that we want to experience in this particular incarnation. And that can be addictions to security, it can be addictions to wealth, it can be addictions to being in various places, wanting to be seen and heard by people. All these different things can be part of the life plan, including where we live and the body that we're in, that we incarnate into. And that can be things like bodies that have disabilities, things like Down syndrome, for instance, things like Asperger's, things like having cancers at certain times. All these sorts of things are things that we think, well, that would be nice to experience that. From a human perspective, we're thinking, well, what's nice about experiencing cancer? But when you're in the energetic, it's a completely different thing. It's that would increase my evolutionary progression by experiencing that and going through the mental and physical aspects associated with having cancer, for instance, or having some other illnesses, or some of the ways in which we are struggling with our incarnation, some of the challenges. So think of these things as challenges. Try not to think in the human term, because this really does negate a lot of things. It makes us not want to engage with our life plan. So the life plan is a series of goals, basically. We want to experience this, we want to experience that, we want to be this, we want to be that, we want to be a master of something, like a consultant surgeon, for instance, or a politician, or a leader, or a craftsman. We can be all these different things. We can want to be leaders of an organisation or leaders of society, for instance. We can work on that, and we can also work on our spiritual input as well, and say, well, we'd like to be able to provide some level of help for those who want to see the greater reality and move forwards as well. And so these things, there's no real roads to them apart from the feeling of needing to do them. And our guide and helpers, we'll go to this meditation later, will help us achieve these goals by pointing in the right direction, organising things in the background so that we meet the right people at the right time, in the right environments, with the right circumstances, to be able to allow us to recognise that we want to go down this road rather than that road, experience this rather than experiencing that, and feel good about this and feel good about that, and be objective about what we're experiencing. So the life plan is a series of goals, basically, based upon all these different criteria. The free will side of it is as follows. There's no hard and solid path from going from A to B. We can choose to go in iterative loops. We can choose to go straight there. We can choose to go up a mountain and over a mountain, or we can choose to go around the mountain. It's about how we get there that makes the free will side of it enjoyable. For instance, we may want to be a veterinary surgeon. We may decide that we want to do it as soon as we leave our university education and go straight into veterinary college. Or we might decide to do it later in life after being a veterinary nurse, for instance. So the way in which we do it is up to us. I mean, from my particular instance, I gained my master's degrees in my 30s and 40s, not straight after going through a post-school and then college and then university education. So I achieved my education in a different way, you could argue a harder way, but some people might say it's an easier way. But the thing is, there was something in my head somewhere that was triggered by my late wife Anne that allowed me to think I need to be able to go and gain these higher levels of education. And so, with the support of my late wife, who supports me now, by the way, and is always encouraging me to move forwards and keep going, I achieved what I was supposed to achieve, which is going through a level of two different types of education. A purely basic craft-based education associated with being a toolmaker, and then moving into electrical electronics and management. And so these things allowed me to experience a plethora of different experiences and different levels of education, and therefore give me a depth and breadth that is... It's not unique, but it's something that's enabled me to be able to understand some of the concepts I'm being given as a result of the meditations I'm doing now. And so, and obviously the books that have been written as a result of that. And so, excuse my froggy throat, there's been a bit of a bug going around my environment, both in my previous location, which I've just come back from Crete, and the people around me now. So for sounding a bit croaky and a bit monotone in voice, it's because of these things are happening around us from an illness perspective. But I'm not quite ill now, but there's something going on with the voice. So we know, we have this gut feeling about what we want to do, and it's how we get there that counts. It doesn't matter how long it takes to do it. It doesn't matter if we even achieve it or we achieve half of it. It's about understanding that we've experienced it and we move forward as a result of that experience. Now, some people, you will note, never finish anything. They go into an experience. Excuse my creaky chair. It's rather quite an old antique chair, and it's quite comfortable. And so, if I do move around, it does creak. Just to excuse me on this. But if when we go through these life plans, it's important to recognise that how we get there doesn't matter. If some of these people who only experience a quarter of something, or an eighth of something, or half of something, or all of something, if they don't finish anything, it's because that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to experience enough of what they're being exposed to give them the level of progression that they desire from that. So people may want to experience knitting, for instance. but learn to knit something and that's it. They may want to experience a martial art. They'll get to a certain level and that's it. They may want to learn how to fly, for instance. They'll get their pilot's license and that's it. It's all about experiencing what you want to experience, and that's enough. So the life plan isn't about perfection. Some people do reach perfection, and that life plan may be that you reach a professorship, for instance, in a university or in a medical environment, for instance, or some other sort of research environment. But it's how we get there. Again, it's up to us. So the life plan is a series of goals that are there as a result of what we've chosen to do together with our true and energetic self and our guide and helpers in a particular incarnation that is designed to help us progress further from an evolutionary perspective. Our free will side of it is how we experience those different goals. The thing is that we experience them in different ways. Some people experience them in depth, some people experience them in various levels of depth or non-depth, so to speak, or just passing by. So the free will side of it is really how we interact with those goals and how we achieve with those goals, because we don't know the best route forwards. There is a best route forwards, and that best route is up to us. So it's, if we want to experience something fast, we will do. If we want to experience something slowly over time, we will do. That's the free will side of it, and that's what makes it interesting and enjoyable being in an incarnate state. If you're in a maze and you knew how to go from the outside of the maze to the inside of the maze straight away, what's the fun in going in the maze? If you have to work out how many turns left you have to do, how many turns right you have to do, and then remember all that so that you can reverse it, how many turns right you have to do and then how many turns left you have to do to come back out of the maze, that's part of the understanding. That's part of the enjoyment of learning. And this is what's part of it as well. It's all about learning as well. So the purpose of the plan is to learn, is to be able to gain the confidence to trust ourselves, to understand our intuition, and go with the flow, so to speak, and understand it. If you notice, when we go against our life plan, things get really hard. If we try to push things too hard, things get really hard. If we go with the flow and we act upon things that are presented to us in a timely manner, things happen fast. Things happen without friction, without resistance. When we try to go too fast, we get resistance. When we try to go too slow, we get resistance. When we go off track, we get resistance. And some of these things that are put in our place to put us back onto track by our guides and helpers can be quite profound. And sometimes they can be quite unfavourable, is one way of saying it. And sometimes we can lose our jobs. You know, our career can go completely awry because we've gone the wrong direction. And although we've experienced something, and that's not lost, the actual aim was to experience something else. And so our guide and helpers put us back on track by working in the background with the guides and helpers of other incarnates that we are interacting with within the environments that we are part of, to help us go back on track, so that when we interact with those others we're supposed to interact with, we benefit from the interaction and they benefit from the interaction as well. Okay, so that's what a life plan is. It's a series of goals to help us progress from an evolution perspective, and those series of goals have an amorphous way forwards, which includes our free will as to how to achieve and go from this particular point, this juncture in our existence, to the next juncture in our existence. And so our way forwards, our road to achieve each of these goals is up to us, is part of our free will. Okay, well, I hope that makes things a bit easier for people, because there's lots of conjecture about life plans as to whether we have got free will or not, or whether they are solid, or whether they are there at all, whether there is such a thing as a life plan. Well, there is, but again, it's a series of goals, and how we get to those goals is purely up to us in our current, almost deaf, dumb, and blind state. Okay. Right, let's go through these questions, shall we? Because there's a lot of questions here today, and there's a lot of interesting questions as well. A lot of questions by WP, And let's move to my creaky chair again. And the first question is, let's call the Earth experience populated with sentient beings a world. Then how many physical worlds are there within our source entity? How many non-physical worlds? If all humans currently on planet Earth were to disappear, would source entity be diminished? No. If all humans, or all entities and beings, because remember there's a difference between entity and being, but generally it's the entities that are incarnating, left the Earth, source entity wouldn't be diminished, because this is simply a place we're incarnating into. It's an environment that we experience to progress our evolution, basically. So looking at it from the question, how many physical worlds are there within source entity? Well, the physical worlds are all within the first universe. And if you classify them as gross physical and physical universe, then we have physical worlds that are of our frequency that we can see now, the first three frequencies of the gross physical. And there's those worlds or planets that are occupied, and they are in the higher frequencies associated with the physical universe. Those frequencies above what we can experience now from our tactile sensory perception, our kinesthetic perception, and our visual and audio perception, okay, which is the first three. Above that is the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, all the way to the 12th frequency. Those frequencies required to make up the physical universe. And there's planets in all of those. There's environments in all of those where some form of incarnate vehicle, whether it's a lower frequency in the gross physical or a higher frequency in the 10th, 11th and 12th frequencies, are allowing entities or beings to incarnate into to progress through evolutionary progression as a result of experiencing low frequency environments. So there's countless, basically. There's countless worlds, specifically the gross physical. If you think of them being billions of galaxies within the physical universe that are attributed to the third frequency level, the first three frequency levels, i.e. the gross physical ones, i.e. those that we can see, or the stars that we can see through our current telescope technology, then multiply it by the countless thousands or even millions that are available within each galaxy, you can see there's millions of billions of planets at this level. And then you look at those that are pan-frequential, which the Earth is. The Earth experience is visible on all 12 frequencies. But there are those planets that are only visible from the 5th frequency upwards, or the 4th frequency upwards, or the 9th frequency upwards. So then you have to multiply that figure I've just given you for the gross physical by the different frequency levels as well. So then it's basically millions of billions to the power of 10, to give it an example. So there is no way that that source entity is going to be diminished. However, as I'm just thinking about this, and I'm just being given something to explain to you, the Earth right now is the only planet where we're allowed to have free will. So the opportunity for us all as true energetic selves and source to experience an evolutionary progression in the accelerated way it is happening now would be reduced. So there would be some level of slowing of the overall evolutionary progression if we didn't work on the Earth now. We will, of course, migrate beyond the need to be on the Earth, and when we move past that and our free will is recognised as being an evolutionary accelerant, then the other vehicles that we can incarnate into in the rest of the physical universe will also be used. And then when all those individuals or entities and beings have got to the point where they have mastered incarnation, then there's no need for any of us to incarnate into the physical universe, and so we'll move beyond that, and that won't be used anymore. We'll move into the next level of frequencies and just continue to experience those. That's quite a long answer to a short question there, so I hope that helps. Next question from the same person. When somebody is murdered at a young age, there's a young lady called Molly Tibbetts, most recently in Iowa, was that part of her life plan? And if so, must there be something terribly wrong with this whole business of planning destructive incarnations? An objective observer might conclude that the whole system is dysfunctional. Nihilism comes to mind. Sometimes the life plan includes a termination juncture, and that termination juncture can be chosen early on. So it could be the second termination juncture, could be the third termination juncture, for etc. Somebody in a young age might be going through the second termination juncture. So it may well be that this was part of her plan to gain a quick exit from her incarnation. And so that means that it's just a way of moving on. I mean, some people choose terminal illnesses, for instance. Some people get killed, their incarnation terminates in accidents, those sorts of things. But it might also be part of her experience and part of the experience of the person who terminated her incarnation. And so there may have been an understanding between these two entities, the killer and the killed, so to speak, that the one would experience doing the killing and the other one would experience being the killed. And so again, we have to look outside of the human thought process and realise that it's just something that we're experiencing. And although we get very, very tied up in our incarnate state and very fond of our human body, it's simply a vehicle that we use, and we should respect, of course, but it's just there to use to help us experience, learn and evolve in a low frequency environment. It's nothing much more than one of a series of suits of clothing that we use, for instance, and we discard afterwards. So I hope that helps that. Regarding the higher frequency new Earths, is the fourth frequency Earth yet to be populated in terms of our third frequency timeline? I assume in terms of event space it's already populated and that all Earths exist simultaneously. Are the continental and oceanic structures the same to Earth, from Earth to Earth? Are the buildings the same? Is the history the same? From an event space perspective, yes, everything's happening concurrently. So that. If you wanted to move into a different event space, if you can use your meditation to allow you to work with event spaces, you will be able to experience these different Earths concurrently. And people move into different event spaces are people who are able to predict the future because they move from one event space to another. In terms of the continental and oceanic structures, are they the same? In general, it's the same planet but on a different frequency level. So the answer is yes, although the population will change. If we consider that everything is happening concurrently and we move from one new Earth to the next new Earth, go from third frequency to the fourth frequency, or the fourth to the fifth, or the seventh to the ninth, for instance, jumping around, then we would see that there's a cumulative effect on what's on the planet. And so there's two things. If you look at it from the outside perspective, you see everything bunched together. So if you're on the ninth frequency, you'd see everything that's on the 8th, 7th, 6th, 5th, 4th and 3rd frequency levels all together. Although if you just focused on the ninth, for instance, you'd only see what's on the ninth because the others would be sort of phased out because they're outside of the physical or the frequential sort of bandwidth, so to speak, that is associated with that particular frequency. And so there's two things occur. One is that the outside observer can see everything that's occurring in all of these different Earths, and those that are focused on a particular frequency would only work on that frequential level anyway, and so wouldn't particularly want to see or observe those new Earths below them. But they could if they wished, but they generally don't, because there's no point in doing that. Although there are individuals who do move down the frequencies to interact with those who are at this level, but they have to protect themselves frequentially by some mechanical means, for instance, by maintaining their own frequency, or if they've got quite a high level of evolutionary progression whilst being incarnate, then they will be able to create their own protection as they go down the frequencies. So the answer is yes, it is populated, and it is being populated on a sort of regular basis by individuals who move from one level to another level. Okay, so there are individuals who are progressing from the third to the fourth, and those who go from the fourth to the fifth. But not many are from the fourth to the fifth. Okay, there tends to be incarnate vehicles that are being used from other people, like aliens, for instance. We call them aliens, but they're just other incarnate vehicles that are naturally existing on the fifth level, for instance, and they can visit the Earth and see what's happening and access the different frequencies associated with the Earth, and can therefore see what's happening on these different levels as well. And some of the vehicles they move around on we call UFOs, and sometimes we see them glowing, which is their protective shield that keeps them at their own high frequency existence. Okay, so next part, regarding incarnation, do we only incarnate on the Earth timeline as we know it, meaning to the Earth or other Earths future relative to the last incarnation? Or can we incarnate into any time frame, past, present or future, in no particular sequential order, e.g. the next incarnation is a Roman soldier followed by a 23rd century entity? And can we incarnate into Earth 4 and then back to 3? Yes, we can. All of those we can do. And sometimes we do. But the progression from incarnating into Earth 3, for instance, versus Earth 4, isn't something, and then back again, isn't something we would choose to do, really, because in essence, once we've done the lower frequencies, there's no need to be there anymore, so we do move on. So if we were going to be moved beyond the need to be in the gross physical aspect of Earth, from an incarnate perspective, we would choose to if we chose to incarnate on Earth, we go in the frequencies above it. So although we can do some of these things, we choose not to because there's no benefit to us. But in terms of moving from one incarnation to another, from different timelines, for example, or different junctures in existence, from say the 1st century to the 41st century, and then from the 41st century to the 29th century, yes, we can do that. It's just that we see things in logical linear progression. And if you Dolores Cannon did a lot of regressions for people, and a lot of her work is based upon the regressions that she did and interacting with them, those individuals, both in previous incarnations, in between incarnations, and in this incarnation. And I know that she also encountered individuals in other existences or in incarnations that are what we would call the future. So we can experience all of these things provided we're able to tap into the right event space and work in whichever way of doing it we are doing it. Okay, so yes, we can bounce around the different things. In fact, when we experience the different frequencies, we don't have to experience those in a linear order. It's just that our progression, our evolutionary progression, is linear. Okay. Next question again is this is another reincarnation question. In the history of the planets as we know, I'll start again. In the history of the planets as we know it, there has never been a higher percentage of people living in the poverty line than today. Yet we still have a majority of people living in poverty. There are about 7 billion people on the planet, and 3.5 billion are poor by any measure. Another billion have an income below the means, but the mean income of Mexico. That leaves 2.5 billion that are relatively well off. Further, some are born into dysfunctional families, communities and nations, and some not. Yes, all of this is created by us. The whole of the drama, so to speak, or the worldwide play is created by us. And there are pockets of poverty within areas of affluence, and there are pockets of abject poverty within areas of poverty. And we choose to incarnate into these things. And so when we experience them because we want to experience them. Again, part of the life plan. But also, it's all to do with really being able to recognise that although we live in poverty, we can have a life plan, which means we get out of poverty, or we have a life plan where we experience it and we immersed in it. And so we do have these pockets of things that we experience. Now, at some point, there's going to be a position on the earth where we no longer collectively, whilst incarnate, recognise there's a need for everybody to be, some of the complete diversity of experience. We would all be of the same level. And that's when we could become more of a collective whilst incarnate, and we recognise each other's requirements for incarnation and for existence. And so when we get to that point together, there will be a common level of living quality, so to speak, if you want to call it financial independence as well. But that is quite some time away, when we start to realise that actually we can't exist and survive by having one group of individuals being totally affluent and opulent, whereas others are digging around the dirt. There has to be a common point where we think, okay, I can be selfish and gain all this, but how does that help? How does that work? It only helps me, and in this incarnation, and then after that I've lost it. So what's the point? So when we start to think about this in terms of what's the point, and actually why can't we make the opportunity for my work for others as well, and therefore we start to work on lifting the overall living standard and quality to the same level for everybody on the earth, then we'll start to move forward into the next golden age. So right now it's part of the plan to experience these things, but eventually it'll be part of the plan to remove these vast chasms of difference in living standard qualities. Okay. Next question is, after an aspect completes an incarnation, does that aspect continue as a sentient entity who then somehow plans its next incarnation, or is that the aspect is reabsorbed into the test, and the test determines through the new aspect what the next appropriate incarnation would be? Well, all this is in the and dialogues, but basically, depending upon the evolutionary level of the test, and depending upon the work that the aspects that have been individualized from itself from the test have worked and contributed, that aspect can either enter into full communion, or a number of different states of communion that does include various different levels of full integration or full immersion back into the sentient energies that is the test. There are times when an aspect stays external to the test but still in a projected and connected state. There are a lot of times when the sentience, although it's in some state of communion, whether it's diverse or compartmentalized, etc., can choose what incarnation is going to have, or can suggest to the Trinity itself, or the Trinity itself will say, right, this is what the experience I want to experience, therefore I'm going to use this aspect instead. So the individuality can be maintained, or it can be totally immersed. That's the individuality of the aspect. Okay, so it could. So it just depends upon the evolutionary level and what the experience is, and another way of saying it, the overall experience of that particular aspect and its expertise in certain experiences is also considered as well. Okay, next question. Regardless, it appears, at least on this planet, the majority of the aspects are chosen to live in poverty most of their entire lives. It's as if poverty is the preferred way to accrue evolutionary content, since there is so much of it, even more now than in the past. Are we, who have been born into the wonderful families and communities and nations and currently prospering, doing so because we've already experienced being poor in pure incarnations? And if so, who is the we here? An aspect experiencing many incarnations, or our true energetic self experiencing many incarnations via many unique aspects? Well, basically, we we can move from a life of poverty to a life of absolute opulence, and then back into a life of poverty. Just because we're currently enjoying an affluent life doesn't mean that we've moved away from living in poverty. So it's just how I explain things. But if you notice that people live in poverty, in a community that's in poverty, they work together much better than we do as in living in affluence. So it's all about how we also work together as well. So we might choose to live in poverty because we might choose to live in an environment where people work together. And I've noticed this a lot, that people work together well when they are, having to work and having to rely on each other to help each other out. A final question from this person. It's one more question just popped into my head as I was listening once again to Last Satsanga, trying to understand the nature of our true energetic self. Does our true energetic self experience life as we know it, as an individual interacting with other true energetic selves within a particular frequency level? And is it aware of the aspects it has created and the real-time activities of those while it is concurrently experiencing a life experience as well? Does our test traverse the frequencies? Our test does traverse the frequencies, but well above where we are now. It experiences individuality as we do. We are apart from our true energetic self, but it experiences it in a different way. The test also experiences everything that its aspects and shards of the aspects are experiencing concurrently. And that also includes the different parallel states as well. So the test is quite a capable part of what we are. Well, being our Godhead or our higher self or oversoul, it's got to be. So it experiences everything concurrently. So we're only experiencing one incarnation, but it's experiencing all the incarnations that are possible from it all at the same time, and all the realities associated with those, all the parallel conditions as well. So it experiences everything. So it experiences self-experience and the collective experiences of its aspects and the shards of those aspects as well. Okay, well, I hope that helps answer that particular question. Going to move down now to another question. Okay. Right, let's put that over there. So I've linked those two together now. Right. So the next question is from MS. Okay. So what exactly is the flow and how do I see the flow? If you have intuition or feeling about something, that is the flow. If you think you're going with the flow but nothing happens, but you still have the feeling you shouldn't be here or there, whatever, does the average person recognise it? Not everybody can recognise the signs. Also, if your partner is in a different space, how do you deal with going with the flow? Or is that part of the experience? Going with the flow in this human vessel is not straightforward without great understanding and patience. If you know you're meant to move on from a situation, but you seem to be staying still, how is this going with the flow? As there is no such thing as time, or is it because there's no such thing as time, then we are going with the flow? Or is it that once you have understood the experience, you're meant to be going through the flow, then happens? So I'll start again. Or is it that once you have understood the experience you're meant to be going through, the flow then happens? Right. In effect, as I've sort of alluded to earlier on in this particular satsanga, when you experience resistance or friction or things being difficult, it's because you're not going with the flow. When things are happening in a seamless way, without resistance, then that is, in effect, us going with the flow and experiencing things the way we're supposed to experience it, in the right environment. We're supposed to experience it with the right individuals. So it really is about using your intuition, about using your gut feeling, so to speak, about really understanding what feels right, what feels wrong. And sometimes our partners don't go with the flow. Sometimes we go in completely opposite directions, which can cause can cause friction between two individuals. But going with the flow there, with two individuals who are at opposing ends, is actually accepting that person isn't understanding of what that flow is, and allowing them to go with the flow by not throwing it in their faces, so to speak, but moreover letting them accept the flow as it happens, in their way as well. So that's also going with the flow, you see. So we may well think, he's not going with the flow or she's not going with the flow. And me having to wait for them slowing me down, actually part of that process is that you're learning to be patient. And that the going with the flow may be going with their flow and not particularly what you think your flow is. So it's all about recognising and understanding from a gut feeling basis and an intuitive basis what it is, what you're supposed to be doing, understanding that you're supposed to be experiencing some things. And some of these things we get frustrated with because we lose our patience with, because we think they should be finished now, or moving forwards, or we've had enough. So we throw our toys out of the pram and say, oh, why am I having to experience this? Why is it taking so long? It's taking so long because it's supposed to be taking that long, so that you experience the right experiences during that particular episode or experience within this particular incarnation. So when things take longer, it's because we haven't finished the experience yet. And we need to experience patience as well. So it's very important to recognise that the life plan and going with the flow are sort of linked together, and that when we go with the life plan, things aren't in resistance. When we get frustrated with them or fed up with them or lacking in patience with them, we can create resistance, and so therefore the flow can be interrupted. So the way to just get to go with the flow is recognise what's happening around you has happened for a reason, and you deal with that. You work with it. You don't get frustrated. You don't get fed up with it. You don't think, why me? You deal with it in a calm, collected manner that is associated with somebody who is evolved, and watch the flow continue. And that's the way. It may seem simple and too simple, but actually it's all about working with what happens around you and not being frustrated by it or annoyed by it. It's a matter of just dealing with it as it happens, and that's it. And then when you deal with it, and as it's happened, and then you see that you're moving forwards, then you know you're in the flow. Okay. Right. Next question's from the US. The lady who looks after the transcription of these World Satsangas, and I thank her very much again. She does a wonderful job for us. And the questions are: here are some questions for our next Satsanga about our lifetimes in series and in parallel, and how suicide affects us. Big questions. Since we know that there is no such thing as time and all our lives occur in nowness, is there a certain sequence to how our lifetimes play out, so that we can build upon the evolutionary content from one life to the next and the next? Otherwise we would all be omniscient already. Is that right? For example, Elmira as incarnated as Abraham, Thomas Becket, son Thomas More, Akbar the Great, Sri Yukteswar, and other characters. These lifetimes don't have to occur in a chronological order, but they do occur in some evolutionary order. Also, but do they occur in some evolutionary order? If so, what is the sequence or series in order of these Elmira incarnations? There are some logical linear sequences that we have based upon us as an incarnate aspect deciding to see the fruits of our work. So if we have a number of lives that are linked together, for instance, when we have back-to-back incarnations where we have a role to play that is not specifically over one lifetime, but over a number of different lifetimes that are in a linear sequence according to our Earth understanding of progression, then Elmira, for instance, would have incarnated in various different individuals that occur in a logical time-based sequence over the history of the Earth, because he will have had a number of lives he wanted to work with a specific excuse me, a specific piece of work, which would be to help others evolve and progress. And so what happens here is it looks as if they appear to be, going from the past up to now and up into the future in a logical sequence. But in essence, we don't need to do this sort of work in a logical way. We can, as I've just explained, we can go from the future to the past to the now, which is all the now anyway, by the way. It's only our understanding is an incarnate being that makes us think it's another way around. But basically, it just depends upon whether we've got a piece of work to do that means that we want to see the work from the last incarnation and how we can add to that last incarnation in the next incarnation. But there are times when we just bounce around and it doesn't matter. So when you see a soul that has appeared to have incarnated in a logical time-based sequence, you know that soul has had a piece of work to do, that it's spread across a number of different lives. Sometimes, though, that work to do, sometimes you might find that there's work happening in a future time that we don't know about. Or there's work that's appeared in a future time that's been fed back into a past time. So, although sometimes these sequences, such as Elmira, Abraham, Thomas Becket, Thomas More, Akbar the Great, Sri Ektas War may appear to be in a logical sequence. It may be that actually it's only a logical sequence to our linear perception, but actually Sri Ektas War may have gone, the Elmira being, or the being that this is incarnated as Elmira, may have been Sri Ektas War first, or Sri Ektas War then Abraham, or Thomas More then Akbar the Great, or Akbar the Great and then Abraham. So there's no sequence, but from our discerning perspective, they can go back. They can bounce around, but in essence, if we see them in a sequence, it's because the effect of the work they've done has been linked up by a number of different incarnations that appears to be logical in a linear way. Okay. Next question. What happens in the case of a miscarriage in terms of parallels? Does this happen only in some parallel lives, for example 50% of them, or not in other parallel lives, or does it vary from case to case? When there has not been an incarnation, because the aspect wanted to experience just being part of the joining of the mother with the fetus, then my understanding is that there's no parallel conditions elsewhere. The only parallel condition would be with the mother. So in the next part of it, if the baby's soul decides to leave through miscarriage in one parallel, what happens to the woman that gets pregnant again? So the woman is the incarnate entity that is in different parallel conditions, and so that individual would arguably not get pregnant with that particular soul who created the miscarriage in the rest of them, the rest of the incarnations. There is some logic to this. Now, the logical mind says, well, hang about. It makes sense to be potentially experiencing miscarriage in one parallel condition, but maybe not in another one. But it's all to do with the intention or the desire or of the being or the entity that is in the fetus, whether it wants to incarnate or not. If it wants to experience multiple conditions, where in one parallel sense it's incarnate, another one it's not, another one it was stillborn, or another one it died after 3 days of being incarnate, then that may well be experienced, and there may well be different experiences of pregnancy that woman may experience. But generally, unless there's been an agreement with the soul that is being incarnated in that mother to do those sorts of things, then generally the mother is only the mother is only pregnant in one particular reality, so to speak. I hope that helps. Okay, next part of it. Can the same baby soul return to the same mother in another parallel scenario, downstream or from the miscarriage scenario? Yes, if it's decided to be in different levels of relationship or incarnate relationships with that woman in different parallel conditions? Yes, it can. But if it hasn't decided to do that, then it won't do, no. Okay, so I've just explained that in the first part. Or is that soul now committed to existing in earlier parallels where the woman carried the fetus to the term in the first place? Again, it depends upon whether that's the agreement between the incarnate individual, who's the woman, and the incarnate individual who is the baby. Usually, it's about the incarnate individual who's the baby who wants to either experience just one level of function of being incarnate, or multiple different functions of being incarnate associated to them. So again, it could decide that it only wants to experience fetus growing for 3 months and then there's a miscarriage, or it might want to experience all those different things and therefore incur the different parallel conditions where it could experience going through full term, being born and dying 3 days later, for instance. It could be being born and going to full adulthood. It could be being dying on birth. It could be a whole bunch of different things it chooses to do so as well. Okay, so it's really is up to the entity as how it wants to experience it, and it also invokes those different parallel opportunities as well. Something we didn't talk about in life plans is we can also work on those as well, work on understanding the different parallel conditions we can work on as well. So continuing this thought process, in other words, can that baby soul loop back into the same woman to share another set of parallels with her if she feels strongly connected to that particular baby soul? Well, just say soul or aspect rather than baby soul, but I understand what's being said there. It wouldn't specifically be being looped back. It could go back, but that creates the parallel condition. So it's not a case of looping back, it's a case of working with the parallels rather than looping back. But then again, that would be a particular relationship that's been set up for this particular series of incarnations, or not as the case may be, with the entity that's incarnating as the baby and the entity that's being incarnated as the mother. Okay. Next question. If so, the logistics for peace parallel lives really is mind-blowing. Yes. And I was looking at all of the different fractals as we were as I was trying to answer these questions, and it was just unbelievably huge. Because we don't see any of the event-based manoeuvring going on behind the scenes. Well, exactly. I mean, we don't understand in any way, shape or form the amount of work that goes on in the background and all the things that we normally understand as well. Okay. Got a few more questions we need to go through, and then I can hopefully go on to the meditation. It's quite a long series of questions, this is actually. Okay, in the end dialogues, you said there are some very advanced souls who may commit suicide just to have the experience of the cleansing process and to create some evolutionary debt as part of their evolutionary path. But you also said it's exceedingly rare to do that. What percentage of human souls commit suicide in the last 1 or 2 of their lives on their evolutionary path? Do we all tend to do it at one point, or end up paying the evolutionary debt as a result of that? My understanding is that there is, I believe from my memory, in the Andals, there's only one entity that's ever chosen to commit suicide, to actively go into the position where it needs to work out evolutionary debt. The rest has all been sort of things that shouldn't have happened, basically. What percentage of human souls commit suicide in at least 1 or more lives on their evolutionary path? Do we all tend to do it at some point and end up paying the evolutionary debt? I am told that around 5%, 5 or 6% of people commit suicide. That's 5 or 6% of the souls that have incarnated, have committed suicide in one way, shape or form, which is a really high number actually. I'm a bit surprised at that. Oh no, I'm getting it wrong. It's 0.6%, sorry. 0.6%, but that's still very high. That's still extremely high when you consider the billions of aspects that are incarnated. 0.6%, still very high figure. Okay. Could the soul that committed suicide, for example, a grandmother, reincarnate back into the same family line with the same soul blueprint to play the great grandmother or the great granddaughter sometime later? Bearing in mind that time doesn't exist, that's possible. But the amount of work that has to go on between the time of departure of the incarnation to the chance of reincarnating later is so significant, it's highly unlikely. But there is a possibility that that could happen because, of course, time doesn't exist, so it's quite possible. Okay. Karen Curry said that the family energy dynamics are intergenerational, meaning that you inherit your energy blueprint from your grandparents, and your grandchildren and your children inherit their blueprint from your parents. Is this how intergenerational family dynamics are set up? Or do souls tend to do a brand new setting in a different family to play out the same issues that lead to their suicide in the first place? It's only through karma between individuals that we end up working together with that individual again, or if there's something particular that we want to work with a particular soul, that we start to work with them over multiple lives. The only thing that families pass on to each other is habits, basically, desires, likes and dislikes, and educational levels. The rest of the stuff is just not important at all. It doesn't happen. So intergenerational family dynamics don't actually. They're just a random thing that happens as a result of people living in certain ways. Children smoke because their parents smoked. Children drink or don't drink because their parents have drunk or become alcoholics. A child might have become a doctor because their parents were doctors, for instance. These are things that happen as a result of the aspect or soul wanting to become something, and that particular family providing the road for them to do that. And so the way in which that incarnate entity develops as an incarnate entity is relevant to the family. It's not something that it brings in from a previous incarnation generally. What it will bring in from a previous incarnation is basically the skill sets that it's had gained in previous incarnations associated with what it wants to experience now. But it also brings in skill sets from previous incarnations outside of the earth sometimes. In fact, quite a lot, actually, thinking about it. But also on top of that, there are experiences he wants to experience. So it's a blank page. So we have to look at it from those perspectives and understand that the intergenerational dynamics don't do a lot in terms of how they affect the incarnate aspect or soul, except within a particular incarnation, and that's it. Okay, right, I hope that helps. Two more questions. One is fairly quick, I feel. Not really, DC says it's not really a question, but could it give us a report at the Satsanga as to how we are doing vibrationally, and are we moving up or staying the same or moving down, for instance? Well, the lady who transcribes for us, US, she asked that question not so long ago, and so I can give you the answer to that fairly quickly. Well, the answer was in the 22nd of August, and that point in time we were going to bottom out, but not go much lower than frequency level 3.13, so to speak, and then we'll go up again. But my understanding is that we had gone higher than sort of 3.15, and we had gone up to about 3.7, but we've dropped down. Basically, it's because of the things that have been happening around us. The sawtooth profile that I saw is a bit like a big wood saw, like a pit wood saw, where you get little teeth on top of big teeth. And so we've been up and down some of the little teeth, and now we've gone down one of the big teeth in terms of the profile. But my understanding is we're not going to go much lower than 3.13. A couple of years ago we were 3.7, which is very close to the fourth frequency level. But when we dropped down to this 3.13 level, we will start to move upwards, and I felt that that's about where we are now, actually 3.13, and I'm getting a feeling that round about October we're sort of bottomed out now. We've round about October. I'm just getting the feeling of where we are. Yeah, we've bottomed out now. We're sort of moving along the bottom of the curve, and I'm seeing us around, and I've got a date. I'm not going to give the date, but I've got a date. But it's this sort of 3/4 of the way through October is where we're going to start to move up the frequencies again, because there's going to be quite a bit of common sense happening in various different quarters around the world. And so we're going to start moving upwards again. So right now we're at about 3.13, we bottomed out, and we're going to start to move upwards again towards the 3/4 of the way through October. As I was to say, you can work out what 3/4 is from there. Okay. So I hope that's answered that question for you. I don't like to use the points, the 3-point something or the 4-point something, but it does give us an idea of sort of where we are when it comes to becoming associated with the whole frequency, because you can be at 3.99, but it's only when you're on 4 that the big things happen, that you actually move, physically move from one frequential level to another frequential level. So you actually sort of zone out or stop being visible or communicated with, or even touchable, for instance, or perceived on the 3rd frequency level when you move from 3.99 to 4, for instance. And of course, from 4.99 to 5, similar sort of thing. Last question from AB. Okay, and I want to answer this question, then I want to get straight into meditation. And this is really a good question, actually. And the question is, I hope you can clarify for me the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. If I remember correctly, in the Origin Speaks, you describe how the crucifixion did not occur, and in fact the event was a type of illusion that Jesus himself, along with his disciples, were able to create via group meditation. I ask because while reading Autobiography of Yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda, and I have a big link with Yogananda, so I'm interested to answer this question, visits a saint who does not eat, but also visually re-experiences the actual crucifixion of Christ, including his laboured walk to the crucifixion site. Paramahansa Yogananda described tears of blood coming from her eyes during this trance, and it is something she experienced weekly, I believe. Yogananda also expounds on the crucifixion himself, making me believe he thought it to be authentic as well. This is also a central point to the several versions of Christianity as well as the religious world in general, so I was hoping you could clarify what happened, and if it were simply an illusion, why the reality of the crucifixion remains upheld even by the most spiritually advanced beings amongst us. My understanding is, and as I was reading the question in the first place, is that it's very much correct that it was an illusion, but the illusion was so good that it's left a huge memory, which of course has been augmented by various different religions over the years, that an individual of note was crucified, and that individual of note was capable of working with higher frequencies. The reality of the situation with those who were immersed in the illusion is that it happened. But the reality of the situation for those who are outside of the illusion is that it didn't happen. So if you think of it in terms of those who are part of the illusion and those who aren't part of the illusion, then you start to see two different realities there. One with the one reality where Christ was crucified, and one reality where he wasn't crucified. The reality where he was crucified was created by Jesus and his disciples to enable him to move out of that environment and to bring closure to a level of antagonism between various different individuals within Judea, etc., and the Romans and the Jews and everything else was going on at that time. And so the feeling of that state of beingness would have been experienced on a massive level by everybody concerned, and so it would have been experienced like a true reality. And this is what this lady is logging into. Yogananda, at the point of writing this, wouldn't have discerned it, or probably wouldn't have wanted to illustrate that he understood what was really going on, because he had to work with these religions. He had to work with Christianity, he has to work with the Hindus, he has to work with the Jews, he has to work with Muslims, etc., to help create a truly universal system that was acceptable by all faiths. If you remember, Paramahansa Yogananda created a church for all religions. So he had to make sure that he wasn't upsetting anybody. So he wouldn't, even if he knew what was going on, he wouldn't have broadcasted that, because he knew that he would have been detrimental to the work he was doing. And so therefore sometimes we are a bit economical with the truth, so to speak, to allow a bigger picture to operate. The bigger picture being, from Yogananda's perspective, his work, which has been very, very well received, widely received, and has been very beneficial to many of his followers. So in that respect, I feel that Yogananda fully, in fact I'm getting an image of him nodding at me now, saying just, I understood that sometimes you have to work with what's there. This lady, he's telling me now, this lady was logging into the energy associated with the feeling of the loss of such an individual. And so she was feeling the loss, not just the local loss of those individuals at that time, but the loss of every individual who's incarnated between then and now as well. And so what we've got here is a really interesting individual who's worked out through yoga that she can work purely in the energetic and doesn't need to eat, but also she's getting energy from the reality that was created by Jesus then to create the crucifixion, to create this image of the crucifixion, or the illusion of the crucifixion. So if you think about that, then from what she's experiencing is that she's experiencing the loss of all these countless millions of individuals over the years. But also, she's also experiencing the loss that Jesus felt by having to do that illusion. Having to stop, after only 3 years, his ministry, because he was advanced beyond comprehension to these people, and they couldn't cope with him. So he had to. So that she's also experiencing the loss of him having to create that illusion, so that he could continue to do some of his work covertly. I'm being told he worked with Babaji in those covert years as well, wherever he travelled around the world. But he never created the same level of noise, so to speak, or radical changes of thought process ever again, because he realised that it was too much for people, and there was too much resistance at certain levels. So my understanding is that Yogananda understood it was an illusion. He didn't want to broadcast it because it was going against the potential. We would have created a problem with his own work. The lady is tapping into the energy that is associated with that being that is Jesus. She's experiencing not just the loss or the images of that were needed to be created, but the global loss of an entity who was lost through illusion, but not in actuality, and the loss of the world by not taking on board Jesus' ideas where it could have been. She's taken on board that loss as well. But also, she's being able to work with the energies associated with Jesus as well, to be able to create that condition where she doesn't need to eat anymore as well. So the loss that she's experiencing is a global loss based on what could have been, and the loss of what Jesus felt by having to create the illusion to allow his continued work, but in the more covert way. So it's a different way of understanding the loss. Okay, so I hope that answers the question. It's a bit complicated, and I don't think I've described it particularly well. And the tears of blood, where that's a metaphoric statement basically that she's been experienced, because that is the level of negative energy that was being experienced by Jesus at that time. And again, so that was part of the tears of blood. The tears of blood are, we're crying for the loss of the world, and we've lost ourselves, our blood, the blood of Jesus, through his having to create this illusion to move out of his public eye, so to speak. Okay, I don't think I've explained that very well, to be honest, but never mind. It is a very difficult thing to understand, that things are understood metaphorically. They're also understood by individuals who decide not to broadcast this stuff because it can be damaging to their work as well. And that's totally understandable, And actually, there's a lot of things that are held back from the common people because it would cause problems. If we all found out that, for instance, the human body is harvested for food, I'm not saying it is, but from different alien races, and that was suddenly made worldwide public knowledge, what would happen there? We would be abhorred, wouldn't we? So it's not a case that's happening, but it's just that it gives you an idea of what can happen if we know things that are kept covertly and responsibly maintained in the background. Because sometimes if we know too much of the real truth, then institutions and organisations that have been based on an untruth, the destruction of those can be more detrimental than the maintenance of those. So that's the way to think about it. Okay, meditation on contacting our guides and helpers. Very simple meditation. Just sit in your straight backed chair, and I shall sit in a way that doesn't make my creaky old antique chair creak anymore. I must change this chair when I'm doing this work. Feet flat on the ground, palms placed uppermost on the upper thighs, eyes closed, back straight, closed eye vision focused on the area of the third eye, which is in between the eyebrows and above the bridge of the nose. I want you to visualize or use your mentally spoken words. They both create the same level of intention. That there is a being by the side of you, on the right hand side. It can be a ball of energy, it can be an egg-shaped energy, it can be an individual body, human body. And on the left hand side of you, there's a number of other entities or balls of energy. And these are the helpers. So on the right hand side is the guide, and on the left hand side are the helpers. This visualization or intention, by using your mentally spoken words, that you've got a guide on your right hand side and your helpers on the left hand side, creates the condition where the guides and the helpers have a link with you, because you have a desire to be with them. Don't try hard. Trying hard creates resistance. Just say that my main guide is on my right and my main guide's helpers are on my left. And then just close your mind, think nothing, and feel their presence. You may feel like a tingling in your body. You may feel slightly lightheaded. You may feel a presence, like somebody's close to you. You may feel as if the room that you're in is very small. Once you feel that there is somebody in the room with you, you can ask them questions. It can be simple questions or hard questions. I'm having this problem at work, how can I solve it? There's something that needs to be fixed at home, how do I solve it? What's the best way to respond in this situation? What's the best way to respond in that situation? How do I know it's you who are helping me? All these questions can be asked. Then you need to make yourself open to any form of communication that may present itself to you. It can be a feeling about moving in a certain direction. Oh, by the way, any information that comes to you may not be straight away. It may not be within the meditation, it might be minutes later, hours later, days later, weeks later. It may come through seeing something on television, reading something in a paper, or some interaction or other with a work colleague, a family member, or a friend. Sometimes the information comes in different ways. This is why it's important to be open to the different modalities in which your guide and helpers work with you. It's not just about gut feelings, it's about recognising that, things like dreams, for instance, are ways in which they communicate with us. So we don't just perceive things in our mind's eye, our clairvoyance, or in our mind's ear, our clairaudience, or our clairsentience, our intuition. It can come from all different angles. Just allow yourself to be patient for the information to come in the most appropriate way it's supposed to come to you, and that you're not going to be impatient and want the information straight away. Sometimes getting the information too early can stop us from using the information effectively and appropriately. Now visualize that these entities are surrounding you in a circle. Your main guide's in front of you, and the helpers form a circle starting from the main guide, going from its right hand side all the way around in a circle, circling us and then finishing on its left hand side. So you are encircled by your main guide and the helpers. Then I want you to visualize or use your mentally spoken words to establish a link with them. You are the center of this circle now, you're the hub. So I want you to visualize an energy line, a piece of energy string if you want to, or an energy tube or hose or whatever, coming from you. It doesn't have to come from a chakra, it just comes from you to your main guide, and you to every helper that you can perceive that your guide has got, working anti-clockwise. So it's from the clockwise side of the main guide, or the right hand side of the main guide, working anti-clockwise around you. This is creating your intention to be linked in with your main guide and helpers all of the time. Anytime you think that you need to re-invoke this link, just do this same meditation again. You can either play the meditation on this recording, or you can remember it or write it down. And go through the same process again. Remember, if you ask a question, ask one question at a time. Be patient about the answer, and don't ask another question as soon as you've had the result from the first answer, first question. Give yourself time to assimilate, I should say, the information given to you by your guide and helpers in whichever way it's come to you, clairvoyantly, clairsentiently, clairaudiently, or via interaction with another individual or individuals, or medium of interaction such as internet, television, computer, or newspaper. You are the center of the hub. Each of these energy lines or string or hoses or tubes are the spokes of the hub, linking you with each of your guides and helpers. If you wish, you can go through this meditation every day, or just once a week, or every time you feel that you need to have some guidance. Just be open to the various ways in which they communicate with you based upon your questions. You don't have to get physical or energetic feelings from them to know that they're there. Just know that you're surrounded. Your main guide is in front of you, and your helpers are all around you, and each of them is linked to you by some energy string, or an energy spoke, or an energy tube or line or something. And you can leave it there. You can come back into the room slowly, knowing that you're connected to your guide and helpers, and knowing that you can expect any answers to your questions to be answered straight away, or they may take some time, some minutes, some hours, some days later. Just be open to the various different ways in which they may, or the various different modalities in which they will communicate with you. Okay, so slowly come back into the room, open your eyes, and take a drink of water to help to ground you again. That's the end of the September Satsanga. Thank you for sending your questions in and being patient about listening to all of the sometimes extended answers I've given to very short questions, although some of these short questions are really good and do create the need to channel the information on the spot. So thank you again. Thank you for Kevin for broadcasting this when he does. And I'm looking forward to the next Satsanga, which will be towards the end of October, of course. And I'm just having a look at when that will be in October. Let's have a look. Okay, I've not got the date straight away. I'll have to broadcast it later. I was going to sign into my my Google Calendar, but my Google Calendar wants me to put my my email and my passwords in. We don't have time for that. Okay, so I'll give the next satsang a date out with the emails as they go out, and also give it to the lady who transcribes, so it'll be at the bottom of the transcription. Thank you for listening. Thank you all for listening to me. The last satsang will be, by the way, the last Saturday of October, so that'll be something you can look out for. Thank you very much. God's love to you all, Source's love to you all, and don't forget to be in the flow. Use your intuition and don't get impatient, and just be calm and deal with things as they present themselves to you, because we've asked them to be presented to us, and know that it's all part of the life plan. Goodbye to you all, and looking forward to working with you again in October.